Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Danny Morley.
And today we are joined by mystical life coach, Emily Armstrong.
Welcome, Emily.
Welcome, Emily. Always a pleasure to see your beautiful face. Emily and I were talking, and she came up with this great topic for a podcast, resistance to your higher path. And we can definitely speak a lot on this because I know that Danny and I run a lot of programs of resistance when it comes to the evolution of ourselves. And so let's just jump right in. Kick us off.
Thank you. So this one, I love this one because it's one of those ones that I realized quite early on when uncovering some of my wounds that it was quite obvious to me that I've been resisting for a long time what I've come to describe as kind of my higher path, which is the path of healing, the path of greater self-discovery, greater self-knowledge, the path of, what some term ascension and some feel a bit kind of, ooh, no, that was definitely me. Anything that involves, spirituality that is outside of the box, let's say, it's becoming less common now. But when I was growing up, thinking outside of, religious terms or thinking about anything that was not, commonplace was just, it wasn't really acceptable. Certainly in the UK where I was growing up. So I realized early on I had quite a lot of resistance to that, which obviously then for me translated into just complete denial. So there was quite a lot of examples of that. Shall I speak to a couple of them? Do you want to share some?
Yes.
No, keep rolling, Emily. You got it. The floor's yours.
Okay. So I think that the story I want to share is the one that was a little later in my story. I was 15. So I'd been through quite a lot of experiences by this point, in my life. And I'd kind of come to the realization that there was some different things about me, which I have spoken about in other podcasts around being highly sensitive and being a bit more tuned into people's emotions and things that were a bit unexplainable. And so I, at 15, had kind of got to a point where, there was like a culmination point where there was no, denying it anymore. And that was really my lowest point of all that I can recall. So obviously as a child, as a really younger child, there may have been lower points, but in terms of what I can recall, 15 was it. I went to a new school. I relocated with my family to a different part of the UK. I started at a new school at 14 and I was extremely badly bullied. I know many people experience that. I understand from my particular, initiations and various mission in this lifetime, I've come to understand that was a big part of it in sort of readying me for lots of other experiences. But the bullying was so severe that there was a point at which, even though I was getting having lots of dreams where there was lots of support, where I understood there was a bigger picture to this, and it was very difficult to interpret because I was still, basically a kid at 15. It really got so bad at one point that I decided that there was no point in being around anymore. So I can speak to it more neutrally now because I've healed a lot of that, but that was where a lot of the hopelessness programs were coming from that I uncovered. I talked about it a little bit in a previous podcast. And I really did make that decision that it wasn't any drama to it. It was, oh, that's happening now. It's really gotten too much. I really don't see the point. And obviously it'd been about 18 months of this situation going on with, you know, the severity growing and the number of people involved growing as well. So it was kind of a natural step for me. It kind of felt like, oh, well, that wouldn't be so bad. And, you know, for anyone that's been in that position, I can't speak to other people's experience, but mine was very much, I was quite numb at the time. You know, it wasn't really much of a decision. It was just like, that makes more sense, and I don't want this anymore. So I kind of got to that point, and the day that I made the decision, I was at school, and I was really decided. Like, it was just like, oh, I just need to find the right way, and then, you know, that's it. And then the lunch break came, and something had happened that was really quite awful again, and I ended up having the first and only panic attack of my life. You know, anyone that's ever had a panic attack, my God, they are horrific.
They really changed my life after I had my first big one, because I remember being curled up in a ball, and I genuinely, the state of mind that I'm in, and I'm sure you can relate, was reality had completely changed. I'd gone completely crazy, and I was never going to come out of this world of panic and this craziness that I felt and the chaos that I felt. And it was, nothing would ever be the same again. And it did. Once I eventually calmed down, the reality comes back. But that memory of how scared I was, that'll never leave. And those panic attacks are gnarly.
They really are. I literally thought I was dying. I thought my wish had come true, so to speak. I thought, this is it. I actually managed somehow to get to a car park that was quite close to where I was when it started. And I laid down in the middle of two cars and was like, I'm ready. I was having a panic attack, and yet I still had the clarity to be like, well, this is awful, and I actually feel like this is probably not a great death, but because I didn't know what a panic attack was. I was 15. But I was like, well, I asked for this, so there we go. It was very strange, obviously, and a lot of those memories I forgot and have, you know, remembered in healing lots of, you know, the wounds around that. But I remember at that point there was an intervention, and this is where I kind of intersect into the denial programs, you know, not being cut off from things that were, for me, easy to come by. I could see things, that was obviously problematic because I was seeing things that other people didn't. I could hear things that other people couldn't, etc., etc. And so I had a visitation at that point when I was hyperventilating with the panic attack. There's a part of me that believes that was triggered in me on purpose, because if I do any breath work, it takes me about 5 minutes and I'm on a different planet. So hyperventilating definitely did that in this form of a panic attack. Obviously, a little bit different and not controlled, but it did the job. And a being of light appeared to me, and it was a very real experience. And it was actually happening to me on this plane. And I had, you know, suppressed a lot of those memories. I didn't want to remember that. But the visitation was brief. The panic attack ended after the being left. And it was all telepathic. There was no words exchanged. It was the only understanding I left with was, that's not happening. This isn't part of what we're meant to be doing. And it's so hard to describe, because it's not like I understood intellectually, oh, I'm not allowed, or anything like that. It was a deeper embodied
Like a knowing.
It was a knowing, it was a comfort on a level that the word doesn't quite describe or, you know, encapsulate in terms of how, like, the level of grounding, ability to know that I could make it through, because it wasn't going to end anytime soon. I wasn't leaving school for another year. And I just understood that I could continue and that it would be okay. And there would be, you know, pun intended, light at the end of the tunnel. It's still now difficult to fully describe what I left with that day, but that kind of energy and you know, I think when certain interventions happen, it's kind of like, you know, you've probably made the wrong choice, or you do actually need some help at that point. And it just came in at the right time, and I really did feel the power of that. So even though that happened and I was able to move on to the next phase and endure that for the next year, because unfortunately I didn't have the support to help me navigate that or get out of that situation, I did it. And that served me really well. That was very helpful, but I was still in complete denial. I completely suppressed that. I couldn't remember being visited for a long time, although I kind of felt like it was in the periphery. It's, again, difficult to describe how that form of suppression works, because it's not like you totally forget, but it's just not, you don't allow yourself to recall it or have those thoughts or memories, is the way I experience it. It's very much a choice to push it to the back and really, really forget about it, which I can see is, you know, much more of a sort of in the program realms. So the denial continued for some time, even though I was getting more abilities coming online that I wouldn't at that age call abilities. I'd just be like, I'm weird. Because of the stigma of it being so strange and feeling so alone in that, I think, like many people, was in resistance to, you know, what I see now as this kind of higher route. I was resisting allowing them through and was very, very good. I have a lot of ability to shut it off. I was very good at shutting it off for a long time and pursuing something else, you know, more of what society deems as normal. So that's kind of my entry point into this podcast.
Wonderful. Yeah, great way to start. And you hit so many different points there. I made a ton of notes. But one thing I want to start to go into is, you know, I was brought up in the UK as well, so I can really understand exactly what you mean. And the programs that we have adopted culturally from, especially the way that you're brought up in that country, very much disconnects you. And, you know, it's got a huge religious background, which is intertwined with the politics. You know, the king in, I think, the 900s or around the thousands, rewrote the Bible. I think one King James, he rewrote the Bible. So there's all this manipulation and programming, which has, you know, woven its way through religion into politics. And I definitely, the more and more and more that I've awakened, I'm looking back to like the younger version of me going through society in the UK and realizing how much society is closed me off from any of my sensitivities, from all of the gifts, how logical and kind of science-based everything is, and as you mentioned, the stigma attached around all of that that's felt. And I can just imagine, like, as you're telling this story of this beautiful young girl, deeply misunderstood by everyone because everyone is trying to fit in and be normal. right? And you maybe being more on the sensitive side, more in tune with these natural gifts, more in tune with more of a higher path, higher dimensions, or whatever you want to call it, and then being outcast and labeled and bullied. And myself, I've been on this huge journey of numbing myself down a lot with alcohol, so I didn't have to feel what I was feeling while I was in the UK. And I mean, on still to now, it's still something that I'm very aware of when I'm feeling a lot, all of a sudden the cravings come back. And this denial of my true path, of what I think the highest path for me would be. And going into that, there's as you mentioned, so much resistance, because you have to shed and let go of all of the layers. And a big wound that I've been working on that, encompasses all of this is with men. I want to be accepted by other men, and learning that because I'm so sensitive, I'm showing up in a different way. I'm contributing to the space in a different way. And that means I don't have to contribute in the same way. I don't have to go out and have all the beers with everyone. I can go out and do that and just be sober and still provide something, and I'm still included. But it's part of my soul's kind of mission, is to feel this pain of not being accepted, because people that are shooting for this higher path, ultimately you have to go against all this programming from, call it religion or politics or society or culture that we've been brought up with, and step onto a different timeline. And to do that, if I was to just fall into the acceptance of what society's telling me I should be, well, I'm never going to step out of that like matrix construction of what we should be, of what a man should be, and step into a different timeline of like, no, you're leading the way into a more elevated place. And in that takes a lot of courage. And to be encouraged, you have to be connected to your power. And all these different wounds and all these cultural programs and societal programs contribute to bring us down, keep us trapped, and then cause all of that brainwashing. Like, oh, I shouldn't be like this. I'm not experiencing. Ellie, I'm sure I would love you to comment on, because it's something we talk about a lot, on how your gifts were very suppressed as a kid, and you were taught to be in denial and to resist all that, right?
Yeah. I mean, my mother is a daughter of a pastor, and so, I mean, the religious programmings were so intense for me. I mean, I was at church Friday, Saturday, Sunday. All I was ever taught was everything that's outside of Jesus is satanic and it's the devil. And so even the idea of like psychic or intuitive gifts, or even the fact that I felt everything so much, was like, that's not real. Okay. If it's not in the Bible, it's not real. And being in an enmeshed relationship with my mother, grew up in a lot of fear. And so in order to combat the fear, it was hardcore Christianity. It was hardcore Jesus. It was hardcore church. And so anything that was outside of what I was being fed wasn't a thing. And you need to deny that aspect of you. And then I think also just being brought up in so many societal fears, and then being fed like everything was television and movies and Hollywood and pop culture and celebrity and all of these things. You realize that literally in order to survive, you must acquiesce to everything that is given to you. And so since I was little, I would literally cry all the time, and I would look out the window. I would do this thing where I would look out the window all the time, and I would just cry. And I would just be like, why am I so sad? Well, I was feeling into the density of this planet, right? And of this world. And then I'd go up to my parents and be like, I'm sad. There's a sadness in you. They're like, no, you're not. You're not sad. Like, there's nothing to be sad about. And I'd be like, oh, okay. So it's just constant, the denial programs. I can relate to you, Emily, so deeply. We were denying who we truly were. we had to really, these programs were here for us to get by, right? Because like you, since I was little, like, all I got to do is disappear. Then I don't have to be in this because I don't know what this is. And this, none of this feels great to me because we were actually feeling the disconnection, right, from ourselves, which is the disconnection from source. You know, for me, I think like I have a lot of womb trauma. And what I've been working on recently was like envisioning the moment that I jumped into this planet. And the moment that I disconnected from source, it was on. You know, it was like the programs began the moment the disconnection happened. The moment the spark was not, you know, in one thread anymore. And so I think I can just really resonate with you so deep. Even when you speak about your bullying, like I was bullied so much. Why? You know, what was it about me that made people pick on me when I wasn't even doing anything, right? And that is the essence of who we truly are. There's something about our light that just triggers people. And so we're put in these situations to begin to understand that, oh, we're on the path of the remembrance. And so as you speak, I'm like, oh, she had to experience that just like I had to experience that. Because if we didn't have those experiences, if we were smooth sailing, right? I always look at other people, I'm like, how are you smooth sailing all the time? Well, their path is not your path. They're not here to do what you're here to do. They're not here to remember. And so now we can look back and go, man, all of those things culminated to us being right here, to us having this awakening, right? This quote unquote awakening into ourselves. But it doesn't mean that wasn't difficult at all.
No, exactly that. It's always honoring the pain. Like, this is part of the work we do. And just speaking to the bullying side of things, yes, that I've come to know that, you know, bullies are obviously largely at the root of it seems to be a lot of wounding, including a lot of insecurity and a lot of powerlessness. So they claim it elsewhere. And I think there are a lot of people that are bullied that actually have a lot of internal power, and on some level that's sensed, and they're a good target because often people that do have power of that kind of degree are also quite sensitive, are also quite intuitive, are also absorbing other people's stuff. So they're sort of like quite an attractive target. But just in terms of speaking to the layers that you were just talking to there is so much in terms of that's feeding into our resistance to this kind of world for a lot of people. Some people are all in, and I can kind of get to those people, the other extreme, if you like. And I'll explain more of that in a sec, but just in terms of the layers that are playing in, I can see, like, you're talking to the cultural reference, which is what I've mentioned. You know, we're talking to politics. There's no space for that in there. It's all very logical and God knows what else, you know, let's not go there. But there's the religious side of things, no space for that in standard religion. That many of us have come to know. You know, my background is Catholic, so, and you know, it doesn't sound as if it was as you know, rigid, if you like, as your experience, Ellie, but certainly it was very prevalent and very reinforced. And then also, Danny, where you were talking to the fact there's another layer for men. You know, women and men are sort of in this camp, sort of experiencing things slightly differently because of the gender differences.
Yeah. And
how that's reflected out in society. But, you know, you look in the wellness industry, you look at the clients people are getting, you look at who's coming in to, you know, your sound healing modalities, or who's attracted to, you know, crystals, or you know, obviously some of our work around the and there's just such an abundance of women.
I've only got women clients.
There you go. So, and it's not that there's no men. I think there's a very steadily increasing number of men coming forward that are like, I want in, quite understandably. But it's traditionally been a little easier, I think, for women to be like, well, I'm open to this and I want to go and see what this is about, and much more difficult to, you know, for many men to take that step, to be curious about some of this stuff. And when I talk about this stuff, I'm just talking about anything that isn't normalized as such, you know, that you might want to ask some questions about, but it isn't sort of given to everybody on a plate, that you might have to investigate a bit. And there might be different reasons as to why that's not kind of out there and available for everybody. But it's just, I find it more difficult. It's like another layer in the way for men. It's just that idea that actually emotionality is not okay, that being vulnerable is not okay, that being open to anything that isn't concrete, logical is not okay. So there's such a multitude of layers feeding into these kind of denial and resistance programs to the higher path.
Yeah, there was something perfect, something that you said there that really resonated, because it was spot on. And because I forgot about it, and because I was trying to listen.
I do that all the time.
I'll come back to it if it pops back up. It was basically the men, the general kind of upbringing that we're taught in society is men can't be emotional because that's not manly. So because I was very emotional, I had to suppress this part of me, but I couldn't deny it. So I didn't feel like a man. But what that was it's not that I didn't feel like a man. It's that's the toxic, that's the wounded part of the masculine. And divine level of masculine is let me feel everything with the love and the power that I am. So, and that's where we're getting to, and that's where we're going. So as a child, had this whole wound around, I reject the masculine. I don't want to be masculine because masculine is insensitive. I also had a wound around masculine, like, the masculine caused me pain, which was a whole victim consciousness that I've been going into recently. But it was this rejection of the masculine because the masculine isn't sensitive, the masculine isn't emotional. But in reality, it's just what we see through our society that it isn't. But that's not what true masculinity is. True masculinity, divine masculinity can feel, is very emotional. And that's the missing link that we need to evolve out of as a whole, is that it is part of being a man is feeling all your emotions and being vulnerable. And so as I'm growing up in the world, I'm internalizing everything that society's bringing me. And as you were talking, I was seeing it as like two separate things, which obviously are completely interrelated. The first one being you've got these societal, cultural, as we mentioned, the political, religious, all these kind of pressures and programs that we tie into and believe into. And then we also have, so that creates a lot of resistance and denial. And then we have the part of us that is scared to go into ourselves. So the fear itself of dissolving our own ego. And obviously the ego and these programs and these wounds, they have consciousness too, and they want to survive. So they will create all this resistance, probably self-sabotage programs. One that I see commonly in myself and in men is when these kind of conversations come up, and it's in everyone, it's not just men, but as these conversations come up, a bunch of behavioral programs of switch off, shut down, pull out the phone, stop, avert my attention somewhere else, so they don't have to engage in an emotionally deep conversation because they can't, because they're not ready to look at themselves, which I totally get, because there's parts of myself as well, there's parts of all of us that we're not ready to look at, because we're not connected to that power. We're not connected to the part of us that can be loving no matter what part of ourselves we're looking at. So like there's this whole bubble of like, I fear going into this work. I fear looking at myself because I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to, I fear, and whenever this is one thing that me and Ellie have been coming back to constantly. It's like whenever we're blaming each other, or hear our inner child or our mind blaming us, it's always the fear of going into ourselves. That's really what we're fearing. And then normally what we find is once we do go, it's just fear. It's just energy. It was just a program. It's not anything. It's all up here. And when we get down here, we feel the fear. It was never really that bad.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, so many of us have experienced that, the other side of it being actually quite beautiful and relief. But yeah, you're speaking to one of the other elements, which is our conditioning to not feel pain, that we don't even have it in some cases. Like, we're just all la la and happy and joyous.
Yeah.
Thanks, that's hard work. Just normalizing that every emotion is equal, and being able to embrace that is a great first step. It's like the first step, I think, even before trying to actually embrace the pain. It's just like actually considering all emotions as like a bit of a signpost, a bit of a roadmap to something's not quite right here. Maybe we should explore this. Yeah, certainly that's definitely a big barrier to being open to this kind of work and moving through your pain. It is a scary prospect. It really is.
Yeah, me and Danny were just talking about how we live in a world. The slogan of this world is "Don't feel anything." So here's a plethora of things that you can do to never feel. And then we walk around and we're like, why is this world so fucked up? Well, because they teach us constantly not to feel, right? And this is a big thing that's been hitting me about even a woman's menstrual cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're taught, oh, like you get your period, you get cramps, like don't feel, here's Midol, here's ibuprofen. It's like everything down to don't feel anything at all. So that's why we drink, and that's why we get Netflix and chill, right? Like all of these things that slip in, these sly things that they slip in into our subconscious so that we can always run to something instead of running back into ourselves. And then we repeat cycles and these patterns over and over and over again, right? And a lot of things that I see on TikTok too is like, I'm so angry, so I'm going to work out, right? And everyone's like, yeah, working out really helps us, helps the anger and not to feel all these. It's another way for us to not feel what is actually coming up within us, right? And one of my clients, I love her to death, and she's got this program that plays that if she taps into her heart and if she connects with herself deeply, that's weakness. Because then she feels vulnerability, and vulnerability is weak. You can't be weak, right? And that's the survival, right? We're constantly trying to survive. So these programs are active, 100% online, working the 9 to 5, 24/7 all day for us to never feel actually what's within us. And then it manifests into all of this physicality, right? Of these diseases, the dis-ease in the body and all of these things. And it's like, I think, I'm at a point, and Danny obviously is a mirror to me. So, and I'm sure you too, Emily, no, we have to feel it all. Yeah. The reason why we came to this work is because all we've ever done is suppress everything. It's the resistance to what is. So what can we find to band-aid it, to placate it, so that we can feel better in this moment? Well, baby girl, the universe will bring this back to you over and over again. So the question is, how many times are you going to cycle? How many times you're going to repeat this pattern until you wake up to, you can't do the same thing and expect a different answer.
Even this morning, I woke up and I'm too sensitive now to really drink alcohol or coffee or have anything along those lines. But I love coffee so much, and I just love the taste of it. I think it's absolutely delicious. Occasionally I'll have a decaf, but that still sends me wappy. And this morning I woke up and I was extremely tired after we got in late last night after traveling. And I was like, I'm going to go have a coffee. I'm going to do it. I'm going to have a coffee. And I had a few sips and it made me even more tired. And I was like, I feel the message is you don't need this. And then as we were walking, we were talking about having this conversation about, how we avoid our pain and avoid the feeling. I'm like, my body needed to let me know I was tired so that I'm not going to bed after 11, right? I'm not making the same mistake but the same choice over and over again, leading to the tired. Instead of just feeling tired all day, no, I want to feel awake. So I'm choosing to even ignore that. It's only a very slight feeling of feeling a little, no, I want to choose this. Well, if you want to choose that, why don't you go to bed a little earlier at nighttime and not, if you really want to make a conscious choice to make sure that you're feeling energetic, instead of artificially boosting it up with a coffee, which now and again we have to do. But that was what was coming through. Like even this very small thing, it was like, oh, I'm bypassing what I'm supposed to feel right now.
Yeah. And something that Danny's been challenging me a lot is seeing the matrix of coffee too. Like really, and I have an addiction to it. Right. And so thinking, he always makes fun. He's like, you don't even finish your coffee.
He'll take 2 sips
and I'll put it down, right?
Like,
and then I start going into, well, Ellie, why do you get coffee then? I have this program that plays when I get in the morning. If I have a coffee, I'll be happy. Like it brings up this like happiness within me. Well, what are you avoiding that you need to go get a coffee to feel happy in that moment? And it's like, well, when I wake up, a lot of times, like I don't feel great emotionally. But if I go get coffee and I have it in my hand and I'm walking around, it's a program that I play so that I don't have to feel the actual sadness that comes up in the morning, right? And then the warrior's work is, no, go into the sadness, don't get the coffee. You're not even drinking it.
And caffeine, you know, it can really block that,
right?
That connection for some people. I can't speak for everyone. With me, it's like it sends everything into hyperdrive and it puts me out of sorts. But yeah, I wonder if that plays in it all.
Yeah. We're just in this constant battle of knowing that we're resisting to what is.
Yeah, I know. And it shows up in so many ways. I mean, like it's kind of beautiful actually, Danny, that you mentioned that, because it makes me think of the fact that to get to this point where I'm diving into my pain and it's been a road. Like, you know, I didn't go from like deny to like, bam, you know, it's just not an overnight process. So even speaking to being more embodied, being more in tune with my body, getting to the point where I'm like, oh, that's probably not good for me, rather than overriding it. Even that is like, certainly from my experience, one of the steps along the way to coming out of that program of total denial, and just even intuitive eating, like what do I want to eat today? Like rather than, you know, the habitual 3 meals a day, you know, even, you know, what I'm eating, just feeling into what does my body want? My body would like to go for a walk. My body would actually like to have a bit more rest. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, I'll make sure I have more time for that. And I'm scheduling it in now. Like it's those kinds of things that actually, even though they're small, they're part of building in some form of empowerment and some form of being more in tune with you and your body and what's going on and paying more attention. And it's a beautiful step on the road to this kind of work, because you're tuned in more to who you are and what the messages that are coming from you, rather than, you know, waking up in the morning and doing what everyone else does, you know, maybe buying a coffee, like walking around because everyone else is walking. I mean, I certainly in London when I was living there, that was where I didn't like coffee before I married my husband, who's very into coffee. So he was like, well, I'm probably going to have to start drinking coffee, which I now adore. And I'm very glad he opened the door to that. But originally it was like, actually, I feel like everyone's doing this. I've got my coffee in the morning, I'm walking to work. I've got like my nice fancy trainers on and I'm like looking really cool. For me, it wasn't even an addiction to the substance of coffee. I feel like I take or leave even now. It was more, oh, this is a way I can, on a very superficial level, fit in. I'm normal. I'm just like you. I'm going to work. I got my stuff going on. Like
that is exactly it. That like feeling of fitting in is something that I've chased and craved my whole life. And I love coffee, like the taste of it so much. And I'd walk past somebody and they'd be sat in the cafe drinking the coffee on the laptop. I'm like, oh, I want that so much. I just want to be normal.
Yes.
And then it's like, why do you want to be normal? You want to be normal because you want to feel like you fit in and you want to be loved by others. And ultimately, that has to come from yourself. And, this whole talk about, we've brought up coffee. We're not demonizing coffee in any way. Still love it. And it's going to work differently for everyone at different parts of their journey. Certain things like this, coffee might come back to me, but I was denying for so long. Oh, I can't do this. I want to do it. And like, as you mentioned earlier, like this override that we get into. And today I took a few sips and I actually listened, which was great. Now, a tip I want to give to anyone listening in terms of we've talked all about denial. We've talked all about resistance. Well, how do we start to actually find what it is that is causing this resistance? What's blocking us? One way we can start to look at it is, okay, we've made the choice to have the coffee or go to the gym or whatever it is. How does that make you feel after it? Are you now regretting the decision you made? And what programs are coming up with that? Are you feeling guilty? Are you feeling like you've done something wrong? Are you running a mental program where I fucked up because this is one that I would constantly play? And then from there, go into that and try and find the root in that. Where is that energy coming from? Because it could be that energy that's causing this resistance or causing these blocks, in energetic blocks in your path to your higher timeline, your higher path.
Yeah, and just on this topic, as your great tip, Danny. But also to something that I do is like, I'm going through a friendship like a challenge right now, and we've been friends for a really long time, and my first response is, I'll just cut her off so that I don't have to deal with everything that's actually being ignited within me to have this conversation, to go through this, right? So even with Danny, right, when we get into we don't fight.
Conflict.
When we get into a conflict, right, my first thing is, well, we'll just break up. And then it actually, the hard thing to do is go into why you're even saying that, right? My client's always like, I'm going to divorce him. And I'm like, do you really want to divorce him? And she'll go, no, because we're afraid to feel what's actually going underneath. So we resist that. So we say things like, I'll break up with you. I'm done with you. I'm blocking you. I'm walking away. It's harder to stay. It's harder to feel. It's harder to dive in.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a reflection on the outside. It's hard to stay with people that are triggering or are making you more conscious or are essentially making you more conscious with triggering you all the time. And yet it's also the same internally. We're just externalizing that. It's hard to stay in the emotions. Yep. It's one thing to actually be like, right, I'm going to go in now. I'm going to get with this. And then some of it comes through and it's really hard and you have to stay. And even building the stamina, this isn't an overnight thing, but it can be done, certainly in 3 months inside the period that the course runs at MSU. I mean, in that period of time, like it's 0 to 60, but one of the points is like, well, actually, I got to stay. It's not just finding these things and uncovering them. I need to stay with them to allow them to elevate, to evolve, to transmute. And I need to bring the courage that is me to stick it out, to stay with those emotions. This is something that comes through with clients quite often. It's like, I was upset for an hour. I'm like, great. Did you let it out? Did you maybe shout? Did you scream? Did anything else come out in that hour? It's like, no, I just really cried and I almost wailed. And I'm like, great, this is wonderful. And it's like, I thought it would never end. And I'm like, it doesn't have a time limit. It is going to end. It's not all consuming forever. Just get it out, stay with it. And I'm so happy for you that you could stick with it. You could see it through, and it really does pay off. But it's just seeing those programs for what they are and really sticking with them. It is the harder choice, but ultimately, as we said earlier, you come out the other end, you're like, thank God for that. And actually there's relief, there's healing, there's some good stuff that comes out of it for other people in the dynamic with you. It's just it's better all around. It's much more self-harmonizing. It's just, absolutely. It's the way to go. But I wanted to, if I can, talk to what I see as the other side. Now, I'm not planning to know anything much about this. This is my observations. But the other side, given I'm new to this world, as I've mentioned many times in previous podcasts, this world of kind of, spirit, essentially, and or source, you could say, universe, and just everything that comes with it. My God, it's multi-layered. I mean, the woo-woo, the people that are not grounded. Rachel often says you need a balance of both, which is so true. You need the grounding and you need to be open to the other side of you, which is also the spiritual side. The human and the spiritual need to come together in harmony. And yet there are people that I'm interacting with on the other end of the scale, so to speak, which is not in that kind of healthy midpoint of the two coming together equally. It's much more, I'm out here, I'm all over the place, I'm literally just doing it. And also I see in that, which is coming through as a really common program now, is this kind of desire to be so yeah, okay, I've never verbalized this evidently, but it's this desire to be at a higher level than they are.
Yes.
So it's like, I know all of this, I do, and you dig a bit deeper and you're like, I'm not sure, I don't know. I've gotten used to kind of hearing a bit more of what's true and what's not, just in, tonality, and obviously just, literally hearing what people are saying, and hearing there is more wounding in there in terms of, I need to be this, I need to be the most informed and the most connected and the most, and that's a really interesting thing I've seen in this world as well, is the want to be more elevated and quickly, and I'm already there and I was born this way. And it's like, do you realize how few people are really born this way? Just completely wide open and connected and with all the gifts, and like it's not as common as there is number of people sort of suggesting that. So there is the other side I've noticed in that regard, which is not in any way a judgment of people where they're at. It's just actually another side of creating more self-awareness. What is the need to be promoting yourself in this way, or to be essentially dishonest to yourself about where you're at? And your elevation is really, how much of your stuff have you cleared? How clear are you? And actually there's a lot of people that it's very clear that they're not. They're really not. And there's a lot of wounding in their speaking and their actions. And so there is that other side. I probably see less often. Maybe just that's my exposure, but it certainly exists. And really, I feel this work is somewhere very rooted in the middle.
Yes.
Too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Big lesson in my life. Wow. Is just because you're spiritual doesn't mean you're conscious. Just because you can channel things doesn't mean anything, right? Because if you're not looking at yourself and you're not working on yourself and healing the aspects of you, that keep you in your ego, there's no evolution. There's no elevation. And I used to put those people on a pedestal, right? Because I'm like, well, you can channel and you can talk to animals and you can do all of these things. It must be you are just on a higher level than me. And the more work that I do, I'm like, oh, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And the big thing of what you spoke about, this desire, right? This desire to be at a higher level than what someone actually is. So this is the difference. So and this is exactly what this work is. What we teach, what we learn is about authentic awakening. It involves spiritual concepts for sure, but spirituality has taken on this own, as you mentioned, like woo-woo kind of path that you can completely get lost by and completely bypass all of your wounding, all of your pain, how you're actually showing up by being spiritual, right? And what this work is about true integration. So becoming the work, becoming the teachings, becoming the elevation. And once we do that, then we awaken to the truth of who we are organically. And so instead of this desire is coming from mind, it's your mind that is desiring to be elevated and to be higher than what it is. And true elevation is getting out of the mind and into the heart. So that when someone, because I have been there and I'm still there. in certain levels. But I've definitely now awakened to a point to see that I was desiring from my mind to be at a more elevated place. And within that, that is its own trap. And that's where you get completely lost, going down the wrong pathway of the woo-woo spirituality, because you're coming from your mind of what you think a spiritual person should be, instead of authentically awakening to the truth of who you are.
Indeed. Yes, exactly that. And that's where this work is obviously quite different, as we well know. And there is honestly, there's no judgment for that, if you're pursuing that kind of route, but it's just being honest with yourself about where you're at and what you really, it's not even about capability. I believe that everyone is capable of psychic gifts, of being intuitive, of being tapped in, of connecting with, other dimensions, other beings, animals, everything. The word becoming is exactly it. If you think and desire it from wounding, think you want it, and it's a mental process, and you're desiring it from wounding and other places, other programs, that I'm sure underneath that, then it's, even belonging could be there, or I fit it quite nicely because this feels comfortable. But there's that too. I've definitely seen that, and I can fully appreciate that. But it is about just taking a step back to think, okay, am I being honest with myself? The way of oneness around truth, around honesty and integrity as well, is just critical to this work. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to elevate in that direction, in wanting to expand and getting excited about that stuff. I mean, it's exciting. It's fun. I know it's not for everyone, but I think it's fun. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just always, I always call it the self-check. It's just constant in this work of just like, oh, where's that coming from?
Yes.
It's just that kind of integrity check, if you like, that's, important.
Yeah. And the more that you unblock yourself, the more awareness you have of self, the more healing you do. This is where discernment really comes in, because the more connected you are to your soul, you can hear divine truth and it ring within you, right? Like there's a lot of people on social media right now who are just bashing the quote unquote new age spirituality and all of these things. And it's like, well, you're in your wounding, so you're going to get lost in the sauce. If you're not going within, right, and you keep searching outside, you will get lost. But the more work you do within you, the more unblocking you do within you, you won't fall into the woo-woo, and you won't fall into all of these traps, right? You'll find the light within, and you'll begin to see the divine truth in the words that other people speak. And I think that's something that I know that you're learning, Danny, and something that I'm learning big time. Is discernment comes from truly how much work you're doing within you to unblock the chaos and the everything that is within. So it's a crazy journey. The levels are insane. It is. Even when you think I made it, it's like, no, you did it. There's a lot more. There's a lot more. It's constant humility. It's constant humbleness. Yeah, what a path.
Yeah. But incredible. It's good fun. It isn't all hard and difficult and tragic and whatever else. It's also fun and courageous and worthwhile and at some points joyous. I've had many moments of just like, oh my God, I feel so much more spacious. I feel lighter. I've got space for more joy. I've got space for more, joyous relationships in my life. Like it, it's just better. And so, yeah, there's so many benefits to it. It's not all a slog, but that is a big part of it, of course. It's the daily, work. I kind of just, as I've said before, just see it as a bit of a lifestyle, really, rather than work. And it's a commitment, but if I'm honest, it's definitely, I don't know that it's definitely for every single person. This work everyone could do easily. Oh, yeah. But the choice to do it is maybe not there for everybody, and that's okay. Like there might be other introductions to it, other energy work, other modalities, other things that kind of get you to to the point where maybe this work might be feasible, it's not necessarily an entry point, but for those that are ready and are just like, let's just get to this, then it's definitely is a really good place to invest your money. Because you can invest it in a lot of other places right now, and it's the quickest route, but it's just,
I used to think the only way to enlightenment was to go into a cave and sit there for 20 years like the yogis did. And I was seriously, debating whether I should just move to India, give up everything, find a cave and see how long I can last in there. Because as I get again back to this desire, there's a desire for me in this life to reach the highest level possible. I have that internal fire, that drive that wants to just continuously better myself and show up to the planet and everyone, and show up to myself as the best human possible. And so I thought the answer was, well, who's done this in the past? Buddha sat under that tree. Let me go do that. Maybe let me go into the caves. Let me do these things. And then it was like, yeah, but then I miss out on living a life as a human. And the beauty of this work is it is both. You get to, if you do this work long enough, you will achieve that state if you continuously are willing and devoted. You don't need to go into a cave. You don't need to study religious texts. You don't need to do yoga. You don't need to do any of that to be an awakened individual. And this is where, me and Ellie have been going around looking for a place to live. And we met somebody the other day that said, we were talking, we're in the mental, emotional, spiritual kind of like healing space. She's like, I do yoga. And I was like, okay.
Which is great. I love yoga.
Yeah,
I love
yoga.
It's a different kind of, and that's it. It's all bunched together, and actually, the discernment piece is really key. You're right. And also just the education. It's just knowing there is a difference between different things, what they deliver. They're not all meant to achieve the same thing.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff you're talking about, like yoga, the exercise you mentioned earlier, like Rachel said before now, it just moves everything around. So it feels temporarily very relieving, like therapy and other modalities. And yet it's still like shaking the sand, and the sand and the water is all around. It feels a little bit lighter, and then it settles again. You're like, oh God, I need to do the thing again.
Yeah.
Shake it again. Then it all settles again. You're like, oh, I feel really dense again. I feel really heavy, That's all it's doing. It's just moving it around. So instead, just, take sand out. And the problem is we're adding more sand with every year of our life.
Right.
We're like, there's more sand to shake around. So it's just let's quit doing that. Take the sand out, get the clean water, which is you, and do it that way. But there is a misunderstanding, I think, definitely out there as to what spiritual means, as to what connectivity means. I mean, I don't know, obviously, Danny, you're from the UK, but if I'm honest, most of the yoga I see out there it's an exercise routine. It's not connecting within.
Union is yoga.
Breath work, but it's not that kind of deep connective yoga. That's not what a lot of people are going for.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing wrong with that, and there's very much a place for that. I mean,
I love yoga. It's just yoga and authentic awakening are not necessarily, they could be the same, they could be on the same path, but there's many things that we deem. You don't have to be a spiritual woo-woo person to awaken to who you are, to awaken. And as you were mentioning earlier, there's so many crossovers. Everyone can do this work if they choose. And if you do choose to start doing this work, it's very simple. It's extremely difficult. It's very simple though. You'll see it translate. And one of the beauties I find is I'm walking around, and we went for dinner yesterday at a Vietnamese place, and the server was incredibly rude. And I could feel a program getting triggered that I'd done something wrong. And in the past, that would have ruined the entire meal for me, because I would have internalized, I've done something wrong. She's pissed off with me. The whole time I would have been pulled out of presence running this program. And I was able to recognize this is what's being triggered in me. She is having a complete different experience, completely independent to us. We walked in and she was in a bad mood. It's got nothing to do with you, Danny. grow your light, become
Mhm.
love, enjoy your meal, right?
Yeah.
Enjoy your time together with your girlfriend and let her move through what she needs to move through in her own time. A prior version of me wouldn't have done that, and it would have ruined the meal. I might have even wanted to go somewhere else. And now it's like this new freedom. And I know that's a very small example, but when you add up every small example that's happening in your life every day, it accumulates to an enormous amount of enjoyment of those small shifts that we make. True change happens through small incremental changes over long periods of time. And the beauty of this work is you'll be doing it all your life because it's so simple. And once you start awakening to how you're showing up versus how you think you're showing up, then there's no stopping, because you're constantly wanting to be like, oh yeah, I see what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that, what ignited in me when she was rude was full on anger. I mean, I'm a New Yorker. Like, I had a lot of anger when I lived in New York. And the first thing that I wanted to do was come at her. Like, what's your problem? Why are you giving me an ad to all these things? And I had this moment where I recognized the emotional program that was activated. And I went, I'm going to love this right now so that I can love her, because she's obviously going through something.
Yeah. She's going through pain.
And it's got nothing to do with me. But that's how we spread darkness, is the unawareness that we are running these programs. So then we project on like this anger and hate towards her. And then again, we're always going to stay in the dark until you realize, no, you can bring light to this. And then we had a great meal, and all we sent to her was like, hope it works out for you, sis, and that's the work.
It is, exactly, and you're right. It's all cumulative. It's totally the work, and you're also right, Ellie. That really important piece of, if we're not in so much pain or able to be with our own pain, we have so much more capacity for empathy.
Yes.
For seeing the other.
Yeah.
And we need that in the world, because it's at an all-time low. We really need that in the world. So you automatically help those around you. By being more of the light, by giving them space, by choosing not to attack, not to personalize. It's incredible the impact you can have. That person feels like they've got a bit more space. Maybe they go home and they move through something quicker, even if it's not with this work. It might be, I don't eat a tub of ice cream tonight. It's that kind of, like, it in small ways, it has such a ricochet effect both ways, whether we lean into the wounds and perpetuate things, or whether we don't, we go with our pain and open up some doors to empathy and more light in the world. Let's go with the latter. My God, do we need it? So
yes. Emily, I feel like the three of us could probably do this for the next 10 hours. But thank you so much for all your wisdom, and thank you, Danny, for all your wisdom. And I hope everybody at home, if you resonate with these codes, if you resonate with the words that we are speaking, visit us at mastersofselfuniversity.com. Set up a free consultation with me, Danny, or Emily, or any of the other amazing mystical life coaches, and let us guide you and really teach you the tools that we are learning, that is just changing truth, truly who we have always been, back into who we really are. Subscribe.
Yeah, if you hit that like button, smash that like button, smash it, share this with your friends, share this with anyone. As much traffic we get through, as much as it can be liked, it really helps us out to put out these free podcasts for everyone. So if you got this far or an hour in, thank you so much for listening. Tune in again, and we'll be back soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. We love you all. Bye, everybody.